Welcome back. Joining me now is Jack Dale, Superintendent of Schools, and Scott Brabrand, Assistant Superintendent of Cluster 4. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're starting off a new school year, and one of the initiatives that we launched last year was called Priority Schools. So it's a great time to take a look back at Priority Schools, see what has happened, successes from the first year, and then look forward. So Dr. Dale, what makes a priority school a priority?
Well, first of all, I think how we got there is probably, like you say, is the most important question. And what we have done over time is that we know that schools with different needs need different resources. And so we staff our schools different based on the resources that are necessary to run those schools. So if you have more English as a second language students, or if you have greater numbers of kids in poverty, you get more resources. And we plow probably collectively over $100 million of local funds into schools that have greater needs. That said, then we look at school performance. And what we did was we ranked all of our schools based on how well you're performing, and do you have gaps between different subgroups of students, both the ethnic groups as well as kids in poverty, special education. And we identified some schools that had larger gaps than other schools and or did not perform at the level that we think is acceptable. And so we said, so what are we doing as a system to support those? And so we gathered those schools together, and we created really a large professional learning community of ourselves as central office leaders and our school leaders, and said, how do we support these schools in a manner that closes gaps and raises performance? So that's what was behind it. Was we believe we had enough resources, but we know we need to work smart, not more resources. So how do we work smartly with the resources that we have to produce the results that we should be getting? So
and Scott, as a cluster assistant superintendent, you're really on the ground in the schools, seeing what's happening with these priority schools. Describe what you're seeing and describe what you saw last year as a result.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is a greater set of expectations around the collaborative team. That's where teachers come together. In the old days, a teacher would go into their classroom, shut the door, and do their teaching. Some did it well, and some maybe just did it okay. Now they come together as a team, and they're not coming together just to have a meeting about a meeting. They're coming together with data on student performance, and they're evaluating that data. What did students know? What should students know and be able to do? And then which students got it and need acceleration? Which students didn't get it and need additional interventions? So the more specific expectations around this collaborative teamwork, and the more specific tracking of data for kids that aren't getting it, so that kids that don't meet a standard have intervention time in all of our priority schools, and in fact in all of our schools in Fairfax County now because of the Priority School Initiative. Intervention time to get focus, intervention, and remediation on that standard. And sometimes a little extra work or a little bit more practice or just a description of a concept or idea in a different way can help these kids really reach the bar that we know they can reach.
So are you asking teachers to teach differently?
Sometimes what we're asking teachers to do is learn from a colleague. One of the things that we've learned too is when you come together with your data, hey, on a common assessment, that's a assessment that we've given throughout a grade level or through a content area like U.S. history. Well, in the old days, I looked at my own test data and went, oh, that's pretty good, but I had nothing to compare it to. Now I come with my teaching colleagues and go, wow, your kids really did good on the portion about ancient Greece. Mine did better on ancient Egypt. How do you teach that unit on ancient Greece? Let's talk about the lessons that you used. And the more sharing really is a professional development opportunity for those teachers to all get better at the strategies of reaching every kid.
That's terrific. Now, we are seeing some real successes as a result.
Right.
Share with us some what
Well,
you've
one
seen.
of the things that when we've identified not all these schools, and then we also have our No Child Left Behind in the federal portion that we are dealing with. But with the federal portion, we had some Title I schools who were under what they call sanctions because they had not been performing. Well, these became some of our priority schools. But then as we work, as Scott is describing, on very intentional work with teachers day in and day out on their performance of their kids and learning from one another, that's part of the art and craft of teaching. But anyways, what's happening is we're seeing increased achievement in these schools, so much so that these 3 schools in particular that used to be under federal sanctions now have successfully performed sufficiently, in fact more than 2 years in a row, and raised their performance way up, they are no longer under federal sanctions. So we're seeing the right kinds of results.
Right, and they're Dogwood Elementary, Washington Mill Elementary, and London Town
Right,
Elementary.
yeah, those are just stellar performance improvements. And the parallel I like to try and tell people is the change that's occurring in schools, Scott was describing, where groups of teachers are working on analyzing their results, and then they go to individual kids to make sure every individual child is attended to most appropriately, the art of teaching. We're trying to do the same thing with schools. We have all these schools, 200 in Fairfax. Are some of them doing really well? Or some only mastering a portion and some not mastering other? That's our job too, is to do the same thing with our schools as we're asking our schools to do with kids.
Yeah, that's
But we're
that's a
not
great
having
parallel.
schools do it all alone. One of the things, every
Oh, that's
priority school has a school support team, and that's a collection of folks from around the system in different departments who are coming in, and they're really sort of a problem solver group for that principal and their administrative team. And that is a very, very powerful piece of this project, because what this initiative is doing is allowing more out-of-the-box thinking. Sometimes we've relied on schools, just like that teacher relied just on being in their classroom by themselves. We've wanted schools to be able to fix their own problem. We've realized with a team approach, getting different ideas, cross-pollinating an idea that works in another school, try it over here. And that kind of internal and external benchmarking, how am I doing within my school, how am I doing compared to other schools that look like me, is another major component to the priority schools.
Just an example of that, we found in some cases we were not getting all the kids to school in time for their breakfast program. Well, we need to change that. And it was through our central office, if you will, collaboration with the team at the school, that not all their kids were getting the same access because they were rushing through breakfast or didn't get it and that sort of thing. So we had to make some changes in our transportation,
Right.
for example. So
Right.
that's the kind of teamwork that we're expecting of ourselves. And it's with limited resources centrally, we don't have the resources to have this many people focus just on each of the 200 schools plus the regular work that we have to do. So what we're trying to do is strategically use the limited central resources we have, focus on the schools in most need, and do things differently to help them. Another outcome that Scott can talk about better than I was some of the reading and math specialists that we found extremely successful in multiple settings. How can we translate that over into some of these other schools to have them really increase their performance in literacy and numeracy?
Great, we'll hold that thought because we're about out of time, but then we'll come back. I'd love to have you guys
Yeah.
come back and talk about what we want to see for year 2 and beyond.
Okay.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you.